When I was making the thumbnail for the video, I first considered putting Subaru as the person carrying Shaula, but I realized that isn't something Subaru would do. Instead, it would be the other way around, and that's why I made that variation in the thumbnail. Regarding the episode, I honestly feel like I have very mixed feelings because I consider a favorite scene of mine was handled very poorly, but we'll talk about that in detail soon. Before starting, a thank you to those who keep my rabbits fed and make my stay on YouTube possible. Honestly, I got a nice surprise today. I remember I only had about 2 people left to greet last time, but today I opened the shoutout tab and I'm surprised to find 12 new people to greet who joined recently. A shout out to Crack's World, to the GTA 5 fan, to Yeon, to Samuel Fu and Agooks. As for my English channel, I have 3 new members. A shout out to Null Vol, who seems to be a Jolteon fan, to Kiol, and to the Shaula fan named Ver. But now, let's get started. Everything omitted from episode 4 of the 4th season of ReZero. You're probably wondering about that confusing scene in the anime. Honestly, I don't blame you if you didn't understand it, and the thing is, at this point, it's hard to understand without previous context, but the previous context was completely omitted in the anime until today. That place you see there is called the Shadow Garden, and it's a site that Subaru visits sometimes. While the anime didn't show it, I did include the first time Subaru visited that place in my cut content series. Chronologically, the first visit Subaru makes to that place, which the anime unfortunately skipped, happens right after Subaru jumps off the cliff, and it went like this.
All that was there was nothingness. Absent-mindedly, he looked around the nothingness of his mind. Perhaps looked around was not the proper phrase. Eyes did not exist within his mind, nor did hands nor feet, nor any pieces of his body. All that remained was his incorporeal floating mind. Knowing nothing, aware of nothing, he looked about. Darkness. A room with nothing. A room that was a world without a floor, or a ceiling, covered in pitch blackness, so great that it defied thought. Suddenly, in the world of everlasting darkness, there was meaning. A silhouette abruptly emerged in front of his mind. The contours of the silhouette were slender, and as pitch black as the rest, the upper body more of a fog, rejecting his mind's recognition. With the emergence of the human shape, the mind gained its first strong desire. He felt a breach in the cold as the shadow gently moved, as if to convey something to his mind. He didn't understand. He was aware of nothing, but for some reason his mind could not avert itself from the shadow. I cannot meet you, not yet. With that faint whisper, the dark world abruptly vanished, and in so doing, the shadow and his mind went with it.
Honestly, there are many more moments where they narrate these encounters, and while I had considered citing them all today, I feel that's a topic that deserves its own separate video. Just keep in mind that the Shadow Garden is essentially a place where Subaru's consciousness appears from time to time and meets with Satella. The most curious thing, though, is that the Subaru who appears in that place seems to remember things the original Subaru doesn't know, and in that spot, he openly professes his love for the witch, though he constantly laments not having a body there. Because if he did, he could reciprocate Satella's feelings. Some believe that when Subaru gets all the authorities, he'll be able to create a body in that place. But so far, he already has 2, and there are no signs of that. Anyway, we'll see what happens when he gets the rest of the sins. I'll add that the web novel version clarifies that since Subaru defeated 2 archbishops, he has been able to manifest a part of his body and his vision in that place. While this leads you to believe that as soon as he collects all the authorities, his body will fully manifest there, this actually doesn't seem to be canon info anymore, because in the official light novel version, the part of the text referencing Subaru manifesting a part of his body was deleted. Regardless, I think this was an error by Yen Press, the organization that translates the novel. These days, I'll check the Japanese novel to see if the text in question was truly deleted, or if it was just an omission by Yen Press. As I told you at the start of the video, this scene makes me very sad because it was a subplot that, despite how important it is for the series, was completely omitted in the first 2 seasons. But anyway, let's hope it's not too late to fix this mistake. By the way, I'll take this opportunity to clarify that there are more Shadow Garden scenes, but I'm not covering them here because they happen much further ahead than the anime, and mentioning what happens in the future with the Shadow Garden would be a spoiler. Then, the part from when Subaru wakes up until he gets out of the carriage is almost entirely adapted. They only left out a small narration from the narrator commenting on what Subaru's sleep schedule has been like since he arrived in Lugunica. It's said that for Subaru, it was already hard to sleep even before he arrived in the isekai world, because he used to think about all his failures and regrets when he closed his eyes and sank into the darkness of his memories. And while things have improved since he arrived in Lagunica, that doesn't stop him from carrying certain regrets and torturing himself, thinking about what he could have done better. Though fortunately for him, waking up is one of the things that costs him the least. Unlike Emilia, who falls asleep easily like a child, but takes up to an hour to wake up. I understand they removed this because it doesn't contribute per se to the main plot, but it's a nice detail to see this side of the protagonist. Upon waking, Subaru quickly deduces he hasn't died, and that's because he hasn't woken up in the cave but in a lit carriage. It's there where his encounter with Betty happens, and a couple of things that had to be omitted. I'm referring to some of Subaru's dialogues where, upon reuniting with Betty, he asks the girl to tell him the names of everyone present. He was so specific with his request because the last time they celebrated, nobody aside from Subaru realized that Julius had been devoured. Betty mentions everyone's names and Subaru sighs with relief. Then she denies having worried about him, even though there were traces of someone who had been sleeping next to him the whole time. Pay attention to this, as it will be relevant later. As incredible and comical as it seems, the scene of Shaula harassing Subaru also had omitted dialogues, and it's a shame because they were lines that increased the mystery of Subaru and Shaula's past. In those omitted lines, Shaula states that it was her own master who ordered her to stay guarding that place, and that she is also an apprentice of his. Honestly, if you're observant, you'll have noticed something about Shaula. Not only is she hot, but the colors of her outfit are the same colors Subaru had when he arrived in the isekai world. Believe me, there isn't a single side novel that talks about Shaula. Well, actually, there was a mention of her in a side novel by Echidna, but when the author published the official version of that novel, he mysteriously deleted the part where Echidna mentioned Shaula. So even if you ask me about this girl's identity, I probably won't give you a convincing answer. Though all of this might be about to change, since it was recently revealed that the author will write an exclusive novel about Shaula and will give it away with the purchase of the 4th season Blu-rays. And if you're wondering, obviously I'll be keeping an eye on that potentially 300-page novel to comment on the revelations. Before I forget, Emilia was jealous for longer in the novel. Not only did she kick Subaru, but she also pulled his hair while Subaru complained that she wasn't helping him separate from Shaula, to which she just says she wasn't trying to help. Regarding the scene of Shaula introducing herself to Subaru, and until they go up the stairs, certain trivial details were omitted, like Mei Li mentioning she prefers not to worry about Subaru since that would provoke the wrath of Petra and Betty. Obviously, Mei Li isn't stupid and says it because she doesn't want to be part of the Subaru-adoring army of girls. But that might soon change because believe me, all the characters starring in the 4th season will have an important role, and that includes Mei Li. Subaru also asks a bit about how the others reacted after the group separation due to the tower's cracks. Julia states he was desperate over that unforeseen event. Anna states she managed to negotiate with Shaula to bring them to the place, but you should already know that kind of stuff from the short video I published. However, what is new is that Subaru discovers who the person was sleeping by his side. Emilia reveals it wasn't Betty, but Ram. This makes Ram angry, and she lightly insults Emilia but pretends she didn't say it. Only then does Subaru ask Shaula if she's the person they were looking for. Something I regret a lot, although it's not irreparable, is that I remember reading this episode at the time raised many doubts about Shaula's origin, and that's because when speaking, she used English words and terms belonging to Subaru's world, which, added to the colors of her clothes, increases the mystery. I don't know if it's because of Crunchyroll's subtitles, but I don't feel that essence was transmitted. Another thing that was omitted is that Shaula is very bad at distinguishing people. For her, a person is someone who has 2 eyes, 4 limbs, and a mouth, while a woman is the same but with certain physiological differences. Only then does she say her line from the anime where she states that if she recognizes Subaru as her master, it's because he has the same scent as him. I think this is a good time to remember that according to Garfiel, Aldebaran smells almost identical to Subaru, so I would have liked to see a conversation between Shaula and Al. Too bad that conversation seems unlikely in the current state of the novel. Something I think is interesting for the viewer to remember is the mention that Flugel, a person who existed 400 years ago, lost his memory, and apparently Shaula is aware of that. Also, when they ask Shaula about Volcanica and Reed, she states she would have preferred Volcanica to die. This is interesting because I didn't remember that fact. I always had the impression that Shaula hated Reed more, but, well, you'll understand this observation better with something I'll say later. Until they reach the green room, there are some reflections on Flugel that the anime omitted, like the reflection where Subaru thinks that when he saw that great tree in the 1st season, he also tried to write his name, but Rem stopped him. And it really catches his attention that the sage Flugel seems to have yielded his achievements to Shaula, and how he seems to be someone who doesn't brag about his achievements. The novel doesn't say this, of course, but this way of being of Flugel's is something Subaru would do regarding his own achievements. I'm just saying that just as Subaru wanted to ride on the tree but was stopped by Rem, or just as he is modest with his achievements, there is also another moment that neither the novel nor the anime mentions. But in times when Subaru was learning the local language, the protagonist once wrote a phrase in his notebook that is exactly the same as what the sage wrote on the tree. It's because of these kinds of similarities that many believe Subaru, in one way or another, is Flugel himself but doesn't remember it. And later, with the trial we'll see, this theory of Flugel being Subaru becomes more suspicious. But let's go back to today's events. The green room scene is largely similar, though there were two nice details that would have improved the moment. One is where Subaru asks Patricia not to take risks for him, to which the dragoness gives him a cut with her scales as if saying, "Look who's talking." It also seems the spirit treats the people in the facility based on a hierarchy, because it said it gave Ram a chair to rest in while it left Subaru standing. Finally, Subaru mentions to Ram that for someone who prioritizes Rem above all else, he finds it strange she came to see him as soon as she knew he woke up. He said she probably did it because she thought of a possible way to wake Rem, and that's why she went to tell him as soon as possible. Obviously, Ram did it because she was worried about him, but she'll never say it. And faced with the Subaru pressing for an answer, Ram only asked him to get lost already. Anyway, while I recognize that Ram is sometimes harsh with Subaru, it's also true that deep down she cares about him in her own way. Afterward, on the path leading to the entrance of the riddle, more interesting things happened that were omitted. There were dialogues between characters where they talked about how the girls in the place didn't reflect their real age. Or Amelia saying she feels like the big sister of the group only for Bayako to correct her saying she should be the eldest. But by far the most interesting part that was omitted was that Shaula reveals the names of the tower's floors. They are names that are truly, truly important for this moment in the series, so knowing it was omitted leaves a bad taste in my mouth. They'll probably adapt it later in another dialogue. But the names the building's floors have are names of stars, and in case it wasn't clear, Subaru is someone with a lot of knowledge regarding that subject. In fact, it's because they cut the floor names that they had to cut another really interesting dialogue. You see, because the names are related to stars, Subaru deduced that among the list of floors Shaula gave him, a floor with the name of a star was missing, and Shaula tells him his statement is true, that a hidden floor exists, one called Merope. When Subaru tries to find out what's on that floor, Shaula seriously tells him he doesn't meet the requirements for that yet. Thus, Subaru is forced to change the subject. Even with the author himself this year, a fan tried to get information out of him about that floor called Merope, and the author just avoided answering. As you can see, there are many interesting things in this part of the story, and before moving on to the evaluation floor, I want to comment on another observation the anime omitted. When they ask Shaula in the novel why she attacked her master like that in episode 2, despite the fact that she could have killed him, she responds by saying it doesn't matter. After all, her master was someone who, in her eyes, didn't seem capable of dying. I'll just remind you that in the eyes of others, Subaru is someone who does everything right the first time and never died. And knowing that Shaula perceives Flugel in the same way really gives one a lot to think about, because it makes you consider the possibility that Flugel had the same power as Subaru. And if you remember my video about Isekai Quartet, one of Flugel's companions said the same thing about the sage. Remember Isekai Quartet? That simple crossover series featuring various isekai anime? Well, when it came time to promote the movie, the author of Re:Zero had the brilliant idea of writing a novel that ended up revealing more than it probably should have. The novel begins with Alec Hoshin, who we know from the side stories existed 400 years ago in the world of Re:Zero, and who, according to Anastasia, is a legend that shaped her entire life. It is said that, from one moment to the next, he's teleported to the world of the Isekai Quartet movie, where he begins to wander for so long that he even loses track of the days gone by. In his first days wandering this new world, he remembers his allies. He remembers a silver-haired girl with a kind heart who unfortunately carried a burden that made fate cruel to her, and who was surely searching for him like crazy at that very moment. He remembers a man who was so strong that, on his own, he could destroy nations, yet lacked much patience, though he could still be reasoned with if you used the right words. He remembers a man with golden hair and red eyes, someone who, despite being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, was humble and truly pleasant to talk to. He also remembers a woman with white hair and a black dress who, in Hoshin's words, cared deeply for the silver-haired girl. Finally, he remembers the most reliable companion of the group, someone who spoke in strange words, using terms from a language not of this world, and who, for some mysterious reason, always knew what to do in the most desperate moments. In the past, Hoshin had survived dragons and absurd sieges thanks to his eccentric traveling companions, who, if you haven't realized it yet, are the following. The silver-haired girl was Satella. The strong man was Reed Estrella. The man with golden hair was Farsale Lugunica, the first king to form a pact with Vulcanica. The woman with white hair and a black dress was Echidna. And finally, the weak but reliable man was Flugel. Apparently, they were all on a journey to save the world, but their trek was interrupted when he woke up in this strange place. Weeks continued to pass, and he recalls how, on one occasion, he tried to end his life, only for Satella to find out, and through her tears, prevent his death. Moved by that girl's insistence, he stopped. He refused to die in this barren world, and upon regaining his determination, he remembered that despite being a weak man, he wasn't the one most prone to dying in his old group. In fact, the most prone was Flugel, someone who concocted reckless plans and fearlessly threw himself into dangerous situations, only to come out unscathed. Thinking of Flugel and Satella moved him. He truly missed his old group of friends. Eventually, Hoshin gave up and decided to die in that place, only to be found by Pantagruel, who was singing a song with English words. Words that, according to Hoshin, he had heard Flugel mention at some point. The most curious part is that when Hoshin met Subaru and Emilia, he said he had known them for a long time and that they haven't changed since then. But that is a story that, if you've seen the Isekai Quartet movie, you already know. Remember, I've started a series on cut content here on the channel. Anyway, another not-so-important thing is that in the novel, Emilia and the others reference the side novel I narrated in a short where they talk about how they tried to solve the riddle of that building. Which reminds me, there is something I want you to keep in mind. I'm very aware that those side stories I talk about in my shorts can be animated in the break times. In fact, in the short in question, I mention that possibility in the first few seconds. I say this because I've received several comments pointing out something I had already warned about. But speaking of video shorts, let me play a short for you that takes place in the times of the first season, and it's where Subaru gives lessons about the stars to Emilia.
Did you know Emilia said the name Beetlejuice right in front of Beatrice long before the Archbishop of Sloth ever appeared in the anime? And the most painful part isn't the coincidence, but Beatrice's reaction, because she actually knew him before he descended into madness. The anime skipped a key late-night conversation where, for a split second, the little librarian almost broke her cold mask upon hearing her old tutor's name from the half-elf's lips. This happens in a side story set just before the incident with the Wolgarms. Emilia, feeling guilty for neglecting her pacts with the lesser spirits because she was busy chatting with Subaru, decides to head out to the garden at night. Before leaving, she chats with Rem, who tells her that if Subaru is being a nuisance, she shouldn't hesitate to say so. Now that he's an employee, he needs discipline. In fact, Rem even offers to lie to the boy if he asks where Emilia is. The candidate simply says that's not necessary, adding that thanks to him, she now sees the night sky differently because of the stories he tells her about the stars. She leaves it at that before they part ways. Suddenly, Emilia arrives at the library to pick up Puck, who had been loaned to Biko for a whole day. But before leaving, she tries inviting Beatrice stargazing. Betty just rejects her, but that doesn't discourage Emilia. She excitedly tells her that Subaru knows a lot about astronomy, and that she didn't know stars could have such peculiar names. Then, she starts reciting the names Subaru taught her: Vega, Altair, and Beetlejuice. In that instant, time stops for Beatrice. The arrogant girl goes silent and murmurs just one word: juice. Emilia asks what's wrong, confused, but Beatrice reacts violently and kicks her and Puck out of the library. We didn't know it at the time, but later it would be revealed that in Betty's early days, Echidna made Beetlejuice her etiquette teacher. To Emilia, Beetlejuice was just the name of a distant star. But to Beatrice, it was the memory of yet another person who left her all alone centuries ago. On her way to the garden, Emilia recalls how Subaru told her about two star clusters. One was called the Milky Way, and the other was his favorite, because according to him, it shares his name, the Pleiades. Let me just tell you, that name is going to be incredibly relevant for Season 4. In the end, Emilia sits in the garden under the moonlight, happy, remembering her astronomy lessons just as Subaru joins the meeting. The elf focused on the class, unaware she had ripped open an old wound in Betty's heart. But that is a story you already know. And, fortunately for her, it has a happy ending. Remember, I've started a series on cut content from the series on my channel, so check it out for more.
There is another side story that narrates how stars are created in the world of ReZero. In fact, the girls from Emilia's camp create one for Subaru, but I haven't made a video for it yet. Maybe soon I'll make one narrating what this process was like. But now that we have the context of the stars, let's talk about the trial room. Among the omitted items, there are trivial facts like Anastasia falling when she left the room once, and also after seeing Shaula's uselessness regarding clues for the trial. Subaru said all the nutrients she ate went to her ass and tits instead of her brain. Yeah, it's a very peculiar comment. But another comment that was omitted and would have given those who only watch the anime something to talk about was one where Shaula talked about her mother. She said she gave her that appearance. Believe it or not, this answer has interesting lore behind it, and you'll likely realize this later. In the part where Shaula shows her fear of Reed in the novel, it's a bit longer. She doesn't say anything groundbreaking, but she makes it clear she loathes him with all her soul. That's why in retrospect it seems weird to me that she says she would have preferred the dragon to die before him. Could it be that the dragon bothered her more than Reed? So far, there have been no signs of that, even in side novels, so Shaula's statement amazes even me. Also, another detail that isn't a big deal but gave a bit more context to the protagonist's thoughts is that they state this place with the matter of the trials is very similar to what Echidna did to them in the past. Then Subaru solves the riddle and succeeds, although the anime omitted an interesting mention of Betelgeuse. When Subaru mentions the star Betelgeuse and Rigel, he says he'll choose the one called Rigel because he has bad memories of the other, and that would be all the omitted content for today. Oh, and this reminds me, in the past when Betelgeuse was sane, he mentions Flugel and addresses him with utmost respect. He states it was Flugel who gave him his authority. I'll leave you that fact to reflect on. Personally, I feel they put a lot of effort into this scene, and that's why it seems like there isn't much cut content in this part. Even with what was omitted, I enjoyed the episode, and while I've complained about the omission of certain dialogues, I'm confident they are things that can easily be added later. But in general, I feel this episode is more of a transition one that spices things up, and curiously, there are other interesting things happening with Subaru's allies, things that spice up future plots. First, it happens with Garfiel, whom we last heard from shortly after his talk with his mother. You know, I'm talking about that story I narrated where he asks Otto for advice on what to do with his family situation. Well, it turns out that days after that event, he receives a visit from Liliana who proposes something peculiar, and it goes like this. While Subaru was facing the centaur, things were tough for Garfiel, who fell into an ancient trap, one likely dating back 400 years, in Priscilla. This is revealed in a side story about the boy, who stayed behind in the Watergate city to defend it in case the cultists returned, though no archbishop ever did. It is said that after 10 days of moving rubble and visiting the injured Otto whenever he could, Garfiel felt frustrated for not having accompanied his captain on his most dangerous journey yet. However, his role in the city was far from over when an unexpected request knocked on his door. Liliana appeared before a stunned Garfiel with her usual flair for drama and a request. She begged him to lend his strength for a vital mission, to clear the path to the witch's remains enshrined beneath the city, the very remains that Capella had demanded. Liliana explained that although many believed them to be a myth, the cult's attack proved they are real and that the city's safety depends on them. Furthermore, she added that Kiritaka couldn't come to make the request himself because he's busy looking for replacements for the Council of Ten. Garfiel, though he hesitated because he was an outsider to the city's affairs, accepted the challenge upon learning that Kiritaka Muse fully trusted him, giving a new purpose to his stay. Upon reaching the basement of the collapsed town hall, Garfiel met a peculiar group. There was Ezo Cadner, a dwarf mage from Felt's camp who was filling in for Reinhard, who had left on another mission with his lady, which I also covered if you want to check that out. Ezo was analyzing the centuries-old architecture, marveling at how the city was designed as a trap despite the limited knowledge of that era. Garfiel questioned if a brat like him would be of any help, to which Ezo fired back at the provocation. The tension grew until a couple of smacks to the head forced them to shut up. The one responsible was Ricardo Welkin. Garfiel noticed that Ricardo was missing his right arm, now replaced by a metal hook due to his fight with Roy. With respect and concern, he asked if he could really fight like that. Ricardo, with a savage grin, blocked Garfiel's mouth with the metal hook, proving to him that this iron was just as lethal as his original arm, and that a veteran like him knew his limits. Additionally, he added that Garfiel's kindness surely won over his little Mimi. The boy simply denied it, saying he was never kind, and much less did he like her. Finally, Liliana joined the group. Garfiel tried to get her to stay behind, but the diva insisted on going as a chronicler to turn their feats into an epic poem. Although Garfiel found her annoying, the idea of a heroic tale about himself was something he couldn't turn down. With the team formed by 2 frontliners, a mage, and a chronicler, they prepared to cross the iron door of the underground temple. Garfiel pushed the door with force, but instead of a hallway, they found a void. The floor vanished, and the 4 were sucked into a deep darkness, leaving only a stupid scream as they fell toward an adventure that would change many things we thought we knew about Priscilla. This novel also gives us a clue about a possible use for a witch's remains, and could explain why the cult was after Typhon's remains. But that's a story you don't know yet. Remember that I've started a cut content series on the channel. Honestly, this is one of the most interesting stories there is, and I strongly recommend reading the original novel. as due to the short format, I can't put all the details in my videos. Also, recently, the author revealed he will release a novel centered on Liliana and what she was doing in these days. I'll try to cover it when I can. On Priscilla's side, things are difficult too, but not for her, but for Aldebaran, who has to handle dealing with Priscilla's mood after she was the victim of an assassination attempt. Did you know that while the events of the 4th season are unfolding, the author of ReZero was already laying the groundwork and side stories for what will be explored in the 5th season? This is revealed in another little-known novel. It is said that after the catastrophic events in Priscilla Bariel's carriage lumbered heavily on its way back to her lands. Subaru and the others had stayed behind to help with the reconstruction, but Priscilla hadn't the slightest interest in getting her hands dirty. Al, fiddling with his iron helmet, asked his lady if she wasn't worried that her indifference might hurt her public image in front of the other candidates. Priscilla called him a fool and declared that his lack of foresight was pathetic. Furthermore, she threw it in his face that his true concern was the sense of defeat Al had been carrying since Subaru's speech, a feeling of helplessness the man was trying to hide by messing with his helmet. Aldebaran thought back on what happened while remembering his master. Upon arriving at the Bariel mansion, Heinkel was found kneeling before Priscilla's icy gaze. The man was begging for a chance to redeem himself after making a fool of himself, an act that ended up benefiting Felt. Priscilla mocked his failure, commenting that he would have been more useful dead in battle than begging for clemency. Suddenly, she sensed something. She immediately sent little Schult to fetch some water just to get him away and asked Heinkel if the sword at his waist was still good for anything other than rusting away. In that instant, the windows shattered, and a group of assassins burst into the room. Priscilla smiled, telling the knight that his chance for redemption had just rolled right to his feet. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Al was protecting Schult from other assassins. He took a deep gash to the shoulder, but managed to take down 3 attackers using his incomprehensible tricks and repetitions after failing countless times. Once he confirmed the boy was safe, he ran toward Priscilla's room. Upon entering, he found Heinkel panting amidst 7 corpses. The last assassin hurled daggers at his vitals, but Heinkel deflected them with astonishing mastery before cleaving the man in 2 in a silver flash. Al was left jaw-dropped at such a level of swordsmanship. Priscilla gave the knight rare praise, offering a moment of respite to his tormented soul. She then ordered Al to unmask one of the assassins and deduced that the attack came from the Valachian Empire. Before he could speak, the assassin committed suicide with poison, following the Empire's harsh tradition where, if you fail, you aren't permitted to keep living. It was then that Priscilla pointed to Al's wound, informing him that the cut was laced with poison and he would be dead soon. Within seconds, Al collapsed into a pool of blood. Priscilla, watching her buffoon in his death throes, ordered Heinkel to decapitate him swiftly. When the knight hesitated, she added that if he died from something so insignificant, that was simply his limit. As his consciousness faded, Al heard Priscilla utter his name with total disappointment. As reality crumbled, Al etched into his soul that he must not take even a single scratch on the next attempt. His life ended, but fortunately, he hadn't updated his save point. Now, Priscilla will surely seek to find out who sent those assassins, thus setting the stage for the Empire saga. But that's a story you don't know yet. Remember that I've started a cut content series on the channel. Priscilla's story prepares the ground for a 5th season, so I'd really like to believe it won't be omitted. Though knowing my luck, it's most likely they'll only adapt it for the 5th season in about 5 years. I hope I'm wrong. But that's been all regarding the animated adaptation. Now let's move on to the author's tweets. Something I confirmed reading the tweets is that apparently Shaula had received an order not to talk much with visitors to avoid leaking information. And while she tried to comply, she actually forgot. But she remembered thanks to her master returning, and with him, that memory. This is confirmed by the author in a tweet. In another tweet, the author comments on how close Shaula and Meili are in this episode, and that, as I said before, has a very logical explanation. An explanation I'll leave in the comments so as not to ruin the experience for the average anime viewer. Then, in another post, the author comments that the way Shaula carried Patrache is a reference to something, even I have no idea what it refers to, but surely it's something Japanese. Then another thing the author adds is that apparently Shaula isn't kind when she uses the green room, and that displeases the spirit there. So you could say they both loathe each other mutually. Apparently, the voice someone hears upon touching the monolith corresponds to the voice of their own person. The author confirms this, saying that Julius and the others heard their own voices when they took the trial. Which makes me think, what does a mute person hear when they touch the monolith? But let's stop asking ourselves nonsense. In another tweet, the author delves a bit into Subaru's love for stars. He says his liking started when he found out his name came from one. I could swear I read this fact somewhere else, but I don't remember where. But to finish, let's talk about the break time. Something I liked about this break time is that they adapted a dialogue I couldn't add in my video, the dialogue of Betty teasing Julius. From there, they only partially adapted the novel. Remember that while it's possible the break times adapt some of the side stories I cover in my videos, it's also true they don't adapt all the details, like the part I narrated where the girls try to solve the trial. But anyway, that would be all for today. Now I have to edit the video about the novel episode that also came out today, so see ya!